Broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wills.
Hello everyone and welcome back to WilmsFront for another featured interview show on this Sunday, the 15th of October, 2023. We are broadcasting on the WilmsFront YouTube channel, the WilmsFront Odyssey channel and the WilmsFront Rumble channel. It is 9 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. The Western world is clients now. What a scientific biological question, which even 20 years ago, everyone around the world could answer without hesitation. Yet here we are in the current year where we see leaders nervously waffle through what they believe the definition of a woman is, or they do provide a definition of what a woman is with an asterisk. An adult human female who is at the front line of the relentless assault on biological sex and reality is Kirralie Smith, Director of Binary Australia, who at the moment is fighting a second apprehension violence order by a male that she identified playing in a women's sporting competition, and has also been forced into a compulsory mediation at the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal by a male she allegedly misgendered by referring to him as a male. Kirralie, welcome back to WilmsFront.
Thanks for having me again, Tim.
We last spoke back in February 2020, before the world went crazy over COVID-19. The world is still crazy, which you are experiencing firsthand with all the lawfare I mentioned, aimed at you, as mentioned. So biological reality is fast becoming illegal, it seems.
Look, it's absolutely insane. And as you said, who would have, even 5 years ago, who would have thought that calling a woman a adult human female and sticking to sex-based realities would be controversial. But here we are. Not only is it controversial, but women like myself are being heavily penalised in lawfare, losing their jobs, being ostracised and bullied in many, many ways. I thought we'd come so far in women's rights and our place in society, and now here we are fighting all over again.
And now you were in Victoria this week at Parliament. You've attended several Why Can't Women Talk About Sex events in parliaments across Australia. I believe there was one federally in the New South Wales Parliament, and down here in Victoria just this week, where Moira Deeming, independent Liberal MLC in the upper house, her motion to hold a parliamentary inquiry into gender affirming care, and I use the quotation marks there because that is basically another Orwellian term, and it used to be called basic a sex reassignment treatment or medical intervention. That was voted down along party lines. The progressive bloc in the Victorian upper house should be called the regressive bloc. The Labor government, Greens, Animal Justice Party, and the Legalised Cannabis Party all voted it down.
Yeah, look, it's really heartbreaking that these activist politicians would rather put their own ideological beliefs to validate their feelings rather than to put kids first. And the reality is that these inquiries are really needed, and wherever these inquiries have been conducted around the world, like the UK, Sweden, Norway, Finland, and many states in the US, they've stopped using these really harmful, and Moira said catastrophic, permanent drugs such as puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, because it does irreversible damage to children, and children cannot consent to the sort of harm that is being done to them in the name of gender ideology. So, I guess the politicians showed us their true colours this week in the Victorian Parliament by refusing to have that inquiry. And you have to ask, what are they afraid of? If they so believe that this treatment pathways are the best for children, then wouldn't the evidence support that? But they don't want the evidence. They don't want it to come to light. They don't want to save our kids.
Well, the argument that they always put forward is that you're attacking vulnerable children, you're anti-trans, attacking a vulnerable group. I know that even though the state of Victoria is pretty much broke, Dan Andrews, he's always found a few million there for LGBT hotlines because of harmful protests.
Look, it's not phobic in any way, shape or form. This is really about the children and what is best for them. We know that puberty blockers cause sterility. Boys especially who take them will never experience any sort of sexual function as an adult. There'll be bone and brain development issues. So, this isn't, again, about feelings. This is about hard facts that cause very serious physiological problems with developing children. And we have very strong boundaries and controls on what kids can and can't do, such as they can't get tattoos until they're at least 16 and in some states 18. They can't drive vehicles, they can't drink alcohol, they can't get married, they can't vote, because we recognize scientifically that a person's brain isn't fully developed until they're 25. And so to allow children to go down these pathways and to encourage children to do this is just insanity. It is cruel. It's not kindness in any way, shape or form. And it's lying to the children, because nobody can change their sex. So no amount of these drugs, costumes, name changes, whatever it is, will satisfy in the long run, because it's based on a lie. It's not based on the truth. And I think, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and that was such an empowering time, especially for women. But there was such a movement of be yourself, embrace who you are, and didn't matter. There were so many tomboys, and there were effeminate, guys who were effeminate, and that was all okay, because we just embraced, that non-conforming. We didn't have to go with the stereotypes. And yet here we are saying if a child is wanting to appropriate the stereotypes of the opposite sex, therefore they must be the opposite sex. Therefore, we have to go down these drastic pathways to try and convince the world that they're the opposite sex, but they'll never be the opposite sex. The sex is written on every single cell in our body. So I don't think it's kind to kids. I think it's really cruel, and the evidence shows us that it's very harmful to their developing bodies.
So your position is about the medical intervention or the drugs that are used to try and medically transition genders, sex, which is biologically impossible. So a biological male or female, they should be free to express themselves if they want. And obviously children, most girls there's always been these experiments that put them in a room with a truck or a Barbie. Almost all of the girls will pick the Barbie and all of the boys will pick the truck, but there will be some boys and girls with no pushing or anything like that, because there is obviously a lot of indoctrination and social re-engineering. But there's always been some boys that'll pick the Barbie and some girls that'll pick the truck, which is obviously, if they want to do that, and it's their decision, but that doesn't mean that they should be injected with drugs to change their biology.
Absolutely correct, Tim. Again, guys can wear whatever they like, girls can wear whatever they like, have whatever hairstyle you want. Choose your own name. If you don't like the name the parents have given you, then choose your own name. But it's this imposition of then, saying that physically we have to change their bodies because they're not embracing who they are. And usually the children have underlying issues such as autism or trauma or abuse or something that's caused them to question their identity in the first place. So I think there's a lot kinder ways and gentler ways that we can support children through the very difficult pathway of adolescence. And let's face it, I don't think any of us really embraced it and thought it was fabulous. It's a very difficult time, but it's the passage to adulthood and, more importantly, maturity. And we're robbing these children from those pathways that will enable them to become resilient and deal with very difficult things, because life is very difficult in many ways. And if we remove that ability from them to go through the normal passageway, the human right that it is to become an adult, then we're creating untold harm. And the harms that we know about are dreadful, but I think that we'll find even more as time goes by. And one of those great harms that we're seeing is detransitioners, the lack of support, the isolation, and the ongoing health concerns that these people have is just dreadful.
You met at the Victorian Parliament Mel Jeffries, who was one of the detransitioners who was featured on the 7 Spotlight special with Liam Bartlett. Now, I watched that and I got the impression that Mel Jeffries still has a lot of issues, and it seemed, I don't, obviously I'm not judging her. I'm not, obviously this is just the impression that I got, is that she saw that basically transitioning was sold, and she believed it at the time, of solving some of her issues, which in the end she figured out it didn't.
Yeah, that's correct. And Mel's story, unfortunately, is very common among people in this community. And, it was, if you can get through watching her interview without, feeling very emotional, then I don't know, maybe you need to check your heartbeat, because that was a really heart-wrenching interview on the Spotlight program. And, she was more joyful at Parliament House, but still had some really horrific truths to share. And, it didn't resolve her issues. And now she has a lot of other complex issues because she had a double mastectomy. She's not going to be able to breastfeed children. That's not reversible. And, some of the things that the drugs did to her body, as well as what's been done to her emotions and her mind, it is really horrifying and quite cruel. And we know that girls in particular are either on the spectrum or have had some sort of trauma and trying to escape their sexuality of being female. For guys, it's often the opposite, that it's through exposure to too much pornography, and it's a very sexualized autogynephilia condition that causes them to want to transition. But either way, guys and girls who go through these processes are left with great harm, often many infections, and then the complications of their bone density or high cholesterol, brain development issues, and I'm sure the list will just keep going on and on.
That condition that you mentioned, orgophilia.
Autogynephilia, yep. Autogynephilia. Yeah.
So I saw Dr. Jordan Peterson mentioned that on Twitter. So that is actually a fetish where men dressing up as women, or it can be women dressing up as men, as a form of sexual arousal.
Yes, correct. And it's much more common in males. It's much more common in males who have, as I said, excessive pornography consumption. They are definitely aroused, not only by themselves as a woman, but by entering women's spaces and dominating in those women's spaces. And unfortunately, social media is now becoming full of images of those males entering female change rooms in particular, or bathrooms, taking photos of themselves with erections, with even masturbating and things like that. It's quite horrific. Not all males who want to appear as female have this condition, but many do. And the reality for women is, how do we know whether the man in our change room is that man or not? And it can be quite disturbing and could escalate to a really dangerous situation for many women.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Wokerly cartoons, which one of its most famous cartoons was this one, how to flash in the woke era. And so back in the olden days, if a man flashed in a female's space, he'd be charged with indecent exposure. But if he does it today and says he's trans, then the woman can be arrested for hate speech, bigotry, turf discrimination.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, one of the most public examples of this is the swimmer Leah Thomas, who, you know, he's a massive guy, has all his gear intact, and would change naked in the women's change room and in front of girls, young girls, schoolgirls who were competing in swimming events. And that's really disturbing for teenage girls who are developing. It's frightening, but it's also, you know, it's something that little girls, children never need to be exposed to. And again, you know, women, we need our safe spaces. We need places where we can go for privacy, for dignity, and for safety. And these men, you know, seem to be getting, especially from public swimming pools and things like that, they're getting preferential treatment over and above the women who we have those separate spaces to begin with, because it's widely recognized throughout the world that men and women are different and have different needs, and there should be private spaces for all of us.
Well, when it comes to toilets and change rooms, I'm an advocate for privacy, period. I mean, obviously, I'm a biological male, but at Federation Square, which is a iconic public place in Melbourne, the male bathrooms are now male plus female with urinals. And that makes me, as a male, uncomfortable that there could be women there. And I don't even like using urinals myself. I'm not comfortable in basically whipping it out in front of other men. I use the cubicles. And even then, when they're not fully enclosed most of the time, so it's not exactly private. And obviously,
and a lot of men say the same thing. Sorry, Tim, to interrupt. Yeah, a lot of men say that.
And when it comes to change rooms, it seems to be in the US in particular. That's why there are these cases where trans women, biological males, shower in the communal showers, displaying their penis. Or one of the weirdest lines that journalists write these days is her penis. I'm sure you'd agree. I think that these communal showers, I think they need to be removed. Like I know that in Australia, a lot of modern change rooms have private cubicles, because even in single-sex spaces, there are perverts. Like in male change rooms and toilets, there are biological male perverts who try to perv on males and boys. And obviously, it's less common with biological females, but it can happen. I just think there needs to be a more focus on privacy in these intimate spaces, period.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and in this day and age, as you said, and sexual abuse and child abuse is rampant, and we could go a long way to protecting individuals by having those private spaces. And I think, you know, I'd champion that idea wholeheartedly.
I'm not sure if you've seen this meme, which attacks people such as yourself when it comes to wanting stronger regulations about bathrooms. It has this woman peering in. Hi, just checking if you have a penis or vagina. I don't want you to make me feel uncomfortable. And obviously, I don't want police to come and barge into toilets, because again they in spaces. And I've seen the third wave feminists, such as, I'll mention the ones that I've seen, Clementine Ford, Victoria Fielding, and Jane Currow. They've said, look, we've probably shared been in the same bathroom as trans women and not knowing it. Like, what's the big deal?
Look, and that's quite possible. I'm sure we've all shared spaces with people that we don't understand or know their true identity. But you don't need to check a male's pants to know that he's male. The Adam's apple usually gives it away, and the jawline and other features. It's an innate ability that human beings have to recognize whether their person in front of them is male or female. And regardless of whether some women, like those ones you just mentioned, are comfortable sharing spaces with males or not, the reality is that there are many, many women and girls that are not comfortable, and we have women's and girls spaces for women and girls, not for males who appropriate the stereotypes or think or wish that they were female. And so I would say to them, either go the whole hog and have absolutely no division in society between male and female and see how that works out for you, or let's get back to reality, back to basics, back to biology. And there's absolutely no reason for a male to be in a female space.
I know that some local parks now, they just have individual, like fully enclosed cubicles in a park. I remember I went to a birthday party at a public park which had those there. They are fully enclosed, and obviously anyone, regardless of gender, can use one, but it is private, and it's like they're out in the open, like those cubicles that are at music festivals mainly, because obviously they're imported there, because again, the old-fashioned public male and female toilets in parks, because there's this convoluted path in, again, that makes it easy for sort of predators to come in and others not see. While I'm not sure if you know the sort of designs that I'm talking about, I'd be interested to get your perspective.
Yeah, look, we've got those in my town as well, and I think they're more than reasonable. As you said, the doors go all the way down, all the way up. It's a fully enclosed cubicle. You come out and, wash your hands in a public space, but it's usually on full display for all of the public. So in my experience, my understanding, they are relatively safe and a much better option than, as you said, the hidden entryways, the possibility of males entering into female spaces. So I don't have a problem with that at all.
This is what I think. Like we have been able to have a proper conversation about what is the best solution here to protect everybody. But that, of course, these sorts of practical discussions are lost in the name calling and the shutting down of debate.
Yeah, absolutely. There seems to be, I guess it's the activist mantra, isn't it? Just to yell and scream, to vilify, to bully your opponent into submission and into obedience. And, this is way too important a conversation that must be had. And if you have something reasonable to say, then you shouldn't be afraid to come and put forward your view. So I'm very happy to listen to opposing views. I'm very confident in my view and happy to share it with anyone who wants to listen. But, history has proven, all cultures have proven that females need greater protections because of our physiology, because of our bodies and the way they work. And it's just mind-boggling to me that we're even having to have these conversations in Australia, and that when we do, we get dragged before tribunals and courts, and some women have lost their jobs over just speaking plain rational truth.
Now, in New South Wales, Chris Minns, the Premier, he wants to introduce, and he's relying on the support of independents such as Alex Greenwich. I looked up the transgender policy chart. New South Wales is currently the only state where you need to have medical surgery to change gender on birth certificate, but Chris Smith wants to change that. But New South Wales already has is it both an anti-homophobia and transphobia law that you can be taken before? Because not even Victoria has that. We have obviously the conversion therapy ban, which also Chris Minns wants to bring in New South Wales, where you live, but we don't have LGBT hate speech laws, and again, you can see me doing the commas there, just so people know that I'm just quoting what they call the laws. So what is the law in New South Wales where you can be dragged all before the courts?
Well, look, it's all very confusing and untested in many ways, but there are, in the Sex Discrimination Act in New South Wales, it says a man is a person who is a male, and a woman is a person who is female, of the female order. And yet, myself, I'm, as you said in the introduction, I've got 2 cases at NCAT, the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, for misgendering 2 males who are playing in female soccer teams because I called them male, and they're male. All the evidence points to the fact that they're male, and yet this will be, I guess, some sort of test case in a way. But Chris Minns, Alex Greenwich really is pushing for these things, and Chris Minns is now saying Labor will do their own bill, but they do want to penalise anything that they describe as or determine is hateful or vilifying or ostracizing in that sense. And it's really mind-boggling because there's no way to measure these things. There's no way to put a boundary around it. There's no, like if I punch you in the face, I have assaulted you. We know what that means and what it is. But when the words keep getting changed, the meanings of words are changed. The Sex Discrimination Commissioner recently just wrote that sex doesn't really refer to biology, which is just incredible. Like, tell a biologist that, tell a scientist that, because it's very important to have words that accurately describe what it is we're talking about so that we can communicate. And to have the penalties now that if we misgender someone, which is correctly sexing them and identifying who they really are, could lead to jail, could lead to a $100,000 fine, could lead to being sued. That's a really very concerning place for us to be in as a society.
Now, it can be argued that Anna Cody, the new Sex Discrimination Commissioner, is just following the law. That obviously the Sex Discrimination Act was amended in 2013. Julie Gillard's first female prime minister made those amendments. What has been the effect of them?
Yeah,
it's over 10 years ago now.
Yeah, one of the last acts she did, her last week in Parliament, they removed the definitions of male and female from the Sex Discrimination Act and replaced it with those who identify as female or identify as male. There's no, what does that actually mean? We have no idea. And, again, it's not a law that's really being tested. Everyone errs on the side of caution in wanting to make sure that they don't fall foul of the Anti-Discrimination Act, but now there's several women, including myself, who are challenging those acts and saying that it's not lawful for you to redefine what these words mean. It's not lawful to muzzle us, to bully us, and to intimidate us into silence. So I don't know. It's all before the courts at the moment, and we'll see what happens. But I know that there's a growing cohort of women and men that will refuse to bow down on this altar of political correctness, on this altar of wokeism and activism, because it's nonsensical. It's not, as I said before, you can't measure it, you can't define it, whereas male and female you can define. It's simply that you have a reproductive system geared around the production of large or small gametes. And it's been the scientific view for, centuries, and well, since day dot really, but definitely for centuries in terms of science. And now, activist politicians are wanting to avoid making a decision about these things, and now the courts have to do it, and who knows what will happen.
Now, there was a motion in the federal Senate brought by Pauline Hanson to have an inquiry into gender affirming care. That was also voted down. There were several Liberals who crossed the floor it was actually the leader, Simon Birmingham, in the Senate, he decided to be a conscience vote, so he could vote against it. So did Jane Hume. Is there any others that I'm leaving out who should be named and shamed?
Not off the top of my head, Tim. Yeah, sorry. But, it was a very important bill, and it was very, very disturbing that so many people, again, like in Victoria, are refusing these inquiries, because the evidence shows us that these pathways should not be undertaken for children, and that there's very serious consequences when we do. And, the CAS review, which the initial findings in that review are horrifying, and we're yet to get to the conclusion of that review. But as a result of that review in the UK, they've stopped or paused issuing these drugs to children unless it's in a clinical trial, because it's not safe for children. And so that there's Australian politicians who, they hate Pauline Hanson so much that they would oppose a motion for a bill that would protect or have an inquiry to protect these children. It's just disgusting, and it reveals the true state of politics in this country, where they would rather play politics than protect and safeguard kids.
Well, they also had Jacinta Price as well, who attended your Why Can't Women Talk About Sex event in Parliament House. And Jacinta Price has said that this is also an important issue for her, that the protection of women and vulnerable children in all settings.
Yeah, absolutely. She spoke very powerfully at our Canberra event, and she made a commitment to pursue this now that the no vote has been successful. Because, who are the most vulnerable women and children in Australia? They are in Indigenous communities, and this insidious, horrible ideology that steals and robs children's innocence and identity and health, the ability to have a healthy life, is truly sad and very tragic. And so to have someone like Jacinta's voice in this space is going to be a very powerful and effective weapon against this ideology. And, what I love about this movement is that there's women across the whole political spectrum, all ethnicities. Doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is. It doesn't matter what your educational level is. We're united because this is an issue that affects all women and girls, regardless of those things. And so, I can stand arm in arm, with people that would have described themselves as left-wing, radical feminists, lesbian, whatever it is. And but we're united on this issue, and we will stand together and make sure that we win.
And now, Liberal South Australian Senator Alan Antic, he's put forward a private members bill to ban child gender therapy, though it does have a exception for teenagers to change gender only when diagnosed with long recognised sexual development disorders. Do you know what he means by that?
Look, I don't. And, that's yet to be seen. I wholeheartely support a bill to ban these these dreadful pathways for children, for minors under 18. I think it's a really common sense move based on evidence, based on science, based on the medical studies that have been done. I'm not sure about exceptions. For me, personally, I just can't see how that benefits anyone to endorse a lie through medicalisation, because no matter what drugs you give that person, no matter what surgery you give that person, they will never change their sex. If it's about appearances, there's better and other ways to go about it. But to reinforce a stereotype, to reinforce something that is very dysphoric in your brain by surgically changing your body or having very harmful drugs, I just can't see how that is the best way forward for these people.
Do you believe that gender dysphoria is a medical condition, that there are biological males and females who they completely identify and want to live with as the opposite sex?
Yeah, absolutely. It is an absolutely true and real condition. But what I, again, would argue is that it's based on a lie. And, someone who's anorexic fully believes that they are overweight, fully believes that they're obese. There's other conditions, people who believe that they should have their arm amputated. And, it's something that they really is very ingrained and deep within their brain that they believe that. But we don't affirm those things in people. We don't surgically equip them to live out what's going wrong in their brain. And so I don't understand why we're doing this for people when it comes to gender identity. It just doesn't make any sense other than to make them lifelong medical patients and to, weaponize them as activists.
Obviously, as you said, there's nothing wrong with people wanting to express themselves in a way that they feel comfortable with. And I'd also argue that I think many trans people, they recognize they're not delusional, that they'll never biologically be the opposite sex. They just feel comfortable as living as the opposite gender. But also, they're definitely, for those who want to pursue these treatments, and when it comes to obviously the genital surgery, which I wouldn't get too graphic, but they're definitely back in this, because trans people have existed forever. There seems to be back in the, like, even the 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot more rigorous process, like having surgery, like male to female, like change, basically melting down the penis to have a makeshift vagina. That's a big deal, and there's obviously things that can go wrong, and there's a lot of there can be post complications, and there's a lot of post treatment. So there was. It seems that it's all regressed, the sort of medical safeguards that were there.
Correct. That's right. And look, we really need to draw the line between children and adults again. I just, under no circumstance do I think a child should undergo any of those procedures, because they cannot consent. They're not fully mature. They don't understand the implications. For an adult who wants to go through those things, I think there does need to be very rigorous safeguards for them as well, because usually an adult who is suffering from gender identity issues has other underlying issues that also need to be addressed. But we also hear a lot from detransitioners, or even people who've gone through with the surgery and, as you said, are now suffering horrific infections. They didn't understand the full consequences. They didn't understand the implications of what could happen when they have to dilate their fake vagina every day, because it's just a hole. It's not an actual vagina, that the infections can happen. It can be very graphic for women who have had mastectomies, double mastectomies, the leaking that can happen, the infections, the blood, the pus. It's really horrific. It's very debilitating. And I think there should be a very stringent amount of safeguards for adults who want to go through these processes, and they have to understand all of the complications that can happen. And if they still want to go through with it, that is their choice. I don't think it should ever be Medicare funded. And I think that that's every adult's decision, and I won't stand in the way. But what I do have a problem with is when I'm then forced or compelled to lie or to go along with a lie. And, Tim, however you want to dress, whatever you want to do, you go and do it. But the moment you impose that on me or compel me to do something that's against my ability to live freely in society, I think that we have a problem.
I'm sure you know who Dana Pham and Catherine McGregor are. They're quite two prominent trans women in Australia. I obviously want to be as respectful as possible, so I call them by their preferred pronoun. But obviously, I draw the line if there's obviously some clear male who's just not dressed and still has a beard and hasn't made any effort. I'm certainly of the original reason why Dr. Jordan B. Peterson became such a sensation. He said, I want to be respectful of people, but I'm not going to be compelled, because this was also during the era of the infinite genders. So there was, I'll mention the other SJW YouTuber, gender fluid, not the other one, because we can't mention them for legal reasons, Milo Stewart, who said there's probably millions and millions of genders, and Milo Stewart identified as, I don't know, by just cutting her hair short, and that's it.
Yeah, look, yeah, I've come to the point, you know, when I started, I was trying to be as respectful as possible to people. But you know, in the probably in the last 3 or 4 years, I will not be compelled to lie about pronouns. I will call Dana, Catherine, whoever, what their name is. I don't have a problem with that. You know, people have nicknames. We call people by their surnames. You know, whatever name in conversation you want me to call you, more than happy to do that. That doesn't bother me at all. But I will not call a male she or her. And I think part of the problem is when we concede that and we go along with it, because that line just keeps getting moved. So not only are we at a point now where the media says things like her penis or his pregnancy, you know, we have very real consequences of that, where a judge in New South Wales in Bankstown local court wrote a decision about a person who had exposed themselves to a child in the public bathrooms, and the judge wrote, when she exposed her penis. And so now we have this in the court. I can't think how horrifying that is for the victims of sexual assault who, you know, are looking at a man and who has a penis, who has assaulted them, and then the judge is calling them she. Are you kidding me? Like, so I just think, no, there's no lines here that should be crossed. If a person is male, he's he. If a person is female, she's she. That's the reality. That's the English language. That has what the words have always meant. But when it comes to your name and I'm standing before you having a conversation, I will call you the name that you've asked me or you've introduced yourself as. I don't have a problem with that.
I do believe that if somebody has committed a sexual offence like that, or a violent offence, like they've certainly lost the right to well, a lot of them want to exploit the trans gender laws. If you've broken the law, you should not be entitled to these rights. And I think it was appropriate that 20 years ago, Frankston serial killer Paul Denyer wasn't allowed to become Paula Denyer. But if Paul Denyer decided, well, 2 years later, I am unsure, given the current laws in Victoria, whether that would just be waved through now.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that there are males, very violent male criminals in female prisons in Victoria, in Western Australia, in New South Wales. This is happening. And again, you know, I think that the lines have become way too blurred. And as you said, like 20 years ago, it actually wasn't much of a problem. There were plenty of, and they call themselves transsexual people, mostly male to female. And I have a lot of supporters who are transsexual because they're very opposed to what's going on with children and to males imposing on women's spaces. But the thing was, they didn't insist that we call them female or accept them as female. They knew they were transsexuals. They just wanted to be respected in public, and I think that's very reasonable. No one deserves to be bullied or ostracized at all because of the choices that they make in their appearance. But we've come to this point now where we're literally being told that we have to accept males as female, that they have changed their sex, and that's absurd. Nobody can do that, and I won't accept that.
As I was saying to you before, I think that even a lot of transsexuals, as they used to be known, they do know that they can never be the opposite sex. But we have reached this anti-science age where it's, what's the slogan? Trans women are women, which is obviously not true.
It's nonsense.
Now,
and we've come to the point. Sorry, I was just going to say, Tim, like in 2019, you know, well before Matt Walsh did the What is a Woman, we asked every Minister for Women in Australia, what is a woman? And every single one of them said to us, federal and state, anyone who identifies as a woman is a woman. It's just completely farcical to make that statement when you can't define what a woman is. How can you protect and promote women?
Now, it should be obvious to everybody that biological men should not be participating in female sports. I think the tide is turning on that. Obviously, that's what's got you your second apprehended violence order against you. And I do know from you don't have. I'm just going to say this. You don't have to say anything, but I know how the AVO system can be used and abused. If the original police one fails, then they can file a personal one. And obviously, the design of the AVO system was to protect women from male abusers.
Correct. So I've actually had 3 applications brought against me. The first one was dropped, and that was brought by an official from Football Australia who wanted me to stop criticising transgender policies in Football Australia, soccer. She withdrew hers before it went to court. The second one, we spent 6 months fighting and preparing. That was a police brought AVO, and that went to Burwood Local Court just last month in September. And again, we had to do so much preparation. It cost me tens of thousands of dollars for my legal team, which included the Attorney General or former Attorney General of New South Wales, Greg Smith. The current Attorney General sent along a barrister and 2 solicitors at taxpayer expense to sit through this whole day where we waited. When finally the magistrate said to us he was ready to hear the case, the application, the police withdrew that application. No apology, no explanation whatsoever. A third one, as you said, is the personal one that's been brought by a different football player, and that went to a full hearing in a local court recently. We're still awaiting the decision. So it's all still in the application stages. The hearing has been done. Now we're in the final stages of this court process before we now embark on the vilification complaint. So it's a very exhausting process. It's a very stressful process. It's very incredible to think that they could use an apprehension of violence order against speech and political speech at that, when there's nothing violent in my words, there's nothing violent in my manner or attitude. I'm not inciting any violence. I'm simply saying that males do not belong in female soccer teams, and this is where we are in Australia.
So I know you'll fight this all the way, and you did the same when there was various legal threats against you in your previous activism with the Q Society and halal choices. But not everyone is as tough, as determined as you. I mean, there's a lot who it'll just be too stressful they don't want to go bankrupt and will just away.
That's right. And, as in my role as spokeswoman for Binary, that's why I'm doing this, because we have 100,000 email subscribers. We know that there's hundreds of thousands of more Australians who feel the same way. Every single day, I receive emails from people who this is happening in their children's school or their local sporting club, or, they're forced to participate in inclusion type lectures at work that have nothing to do with their job and things like that. So, and I'm very aware that people don't have the resources. I have the resources because of the organisation that I front. I do have the tenacity, and I do have the absolute desire. This is the hill I will die on. I will not surrender. I will not concede any ground in this fight. But there are other women who are standing shoulder to shoulder in this, like Sal Grover and Louise Elliott and Holly Lawford Smith and Dr. Gillian Spencer. Like there's quite a few. Catherine Deves. We will not be silenced. We will not concede this ground, because there are too many women, too many girls and men who stand in this space and are bullied every single day. And it's just gone way beyond what it ever should have. And we need to stand firm to roll this tide right back.
Well, J.K. Rowling said the other day that she's prepared to go to jail She was responding to that. It was put up in a public space. Trans women are women. I mean, she has. Well, she is prepared to put everything on the line. This is the hill that she's going to die on, but I also say, like, it's impossible to cancel her. Her books will live on forever.
Yeah, she's a very wonderful woman to, make this such an important part of her legacy, and that she will go down, if she goes down, with a fight. And, it was actually in response to the UK are trying to bring in the law that if you misgender someone, you can face up to 2 years jail. Australia right now is debating the misinformation, disinformation bill, which I think will be weaponized in this space as well. We have the vilification and anti-discrimination laws that are already being tried for this as well. So, look, I stand with her. I say exactly the same thing. I do not want to go to jail. I do not want to pay the fines. I do not want to go through this process. There's nothing in me that desires this. But the option, there is no option. I'm not going to look at my children in the eyes, or look at the next generation, or my sisters, or my, fellow countrymen in this place to go, oh, well, I didn't want to take it on. It has to be fought. It has to be done. And if it means we end up in jail because we say men are not women, like, how absurd. That history's not going to look kind on the people who put us in jail. That's for sure.
Well, there's already a teacher in Ireland who's been jailed because he wouldn't affirm he was suspended, and then he was jailed for breaching a restraining order at the school while it was before the courts. He wouldn't affirm a child's gender. So it's already happening, albeit indirectly.
Yeah, and look, there's always, unfortunately, I guess, the martyrs and the people who have to pave the way by counting the cost and going, it's worth it, because I don't want to pass on a society to my children and to the next generation based on lies, because where does it end? Like, there is no measure in that sort of society. And so hopefully the pendulum has swung as far as it's going to swing, but if it has to go further, I'll hang on for the ride. I will not bow down on that altar.
And now, one of the justifications that is being put forward why in Victoria, why there needs to be urgent LGBT hate speech vilification laws, is to basically silence opposition to drag queen story times, which have popped up at all of these local libraries. And of course, Dan Andrews on Ida Hobbit Day, another one of those alphabet days, invited drag queens to read to children in the Parliament. And it's been, again, the argument is that the opponents of these drag queen story times that made violent threats against the libraries are still yet to see any evidence of that. But this is like, do you still know where all of a sudden this drag queen story time phenomenon came from, where it's
I'll talk to that in just. Yeah, look, but even before that, let's just be clear. There's already laws in place that you can't be violent towards someone, you can't assault them, you can't harass them, you can't intimidate them. So we don't need a special class of laws for LGBT people. Like, the law covers all people, regardless of your sexual orientation, your ethnicity, whatever it is. So it's ridiculous that this is even being, discussed. In terms of drag queen story time, look. First of all, I'll say, drag queens they're adult entertainers. They belong in adult venues only. There is no reason whatsoever that adult men with sexual fetishes to dress as women need to have an audience of children. And why they want an audience of children, well, is beyond me, or otherwise it's very obvious. And so I believe it was America that started these drag queen story times, but it's taken off around the Western world and here in Australia. Lots of councils at ratepayer expense are paying for these men who dress as women, make a mockery of women. There's no difference between blackface and woman face whatsoever in my mind. It's disrespectful to women. Again, if you want to disrespect women and go and be entertained by these people, go and pay your money, go to a bar, an adult entertainment venue, and do it. But to have it paraded in front of children at the ratepayers' expense is completely unnecessary. We've seen lots in America where those men do have criminal records and should never be in front of children anyway. And when you look at the social media of many of the drag queens in Australia who are being invited by these libraries, they are horrendous. The sexual innuendo, the foul language, the sexual sexuality, or it's not the sexuality, but the sexual expression of these people really does only belong to a very small cohort of people in our society. And there's just no need to expose children to it whatsoever.
Well, your friend Lyle Shelton, he endured a 2-year ordeal, being taken to court by a drag queen who took offense at his posts, and that was the same drag queen that the late Wilson Gavin, a gay man himself, protested the drag queen's story time in the Brisbane library. And so that was obviously, he, like you, he fought it and was successful, but again, it's the process is the punishment.
Well, it is. And unfortunately, though, there's actually 2 drag queens in this case, and they have launched an appeal against that decision. It, as you said, took 2 years going through QCAT and over $300,000 in expense to Lyle. I believe the drag queens are funded pretty much by the taxpayer. And in my case, that's the same. But Lyle has stood firm. And all he said was that they're not appropriate role models for children. Like, he didn't swear, he didn't threaten, he didn't even draw any other moral sort of conclusion. And yet this battle has been going on. And, you know, unlike yourself, many in the media refuse to report on it, talk about it, discuss it. Which again, I think as Australians hear about these cases, they're actually horrified that this is where public resources are being used to silence political speech and just good old-fashioned common sense.
I do disagree with you that drag queens are doing woman fakes, that they're mocking women. A lot of them wouldn't believe that's what they're doing. I don't think they are women. I mean, obviously, they are dressing up. But certainly, if an adult, where we would agree, if an adult wants to go and see a drag show in an adult venue, then go for it.
Well, look, you know, I think there'd be a lot of people who wore blackface and said that they weren't insulting black people and that they were doing it to honor them or, you know, to experience their culture or whatever. And we don't accept that argument. So I don't accept that these men are not mocking women. I think they are mocking women. And as a woman, I find it really offensive. But that's the beauty of a democracy in our country, Tim. We can have a difference of opinion, and that's completely fine. You listen to my voice, I listen to yours, and that's really important. But yeah, we do both agree. Go to the venues, they're adult venues, go for your life if that's what you want to do. Don't impose it on me and my children.
Now, we have seen some trans women, biological males, win beauty pageants. Now, obviously, beauty pageants are different from sport. Like, I would argue that trans women are at a disadvantage when it comes to competing in beauty pageants. What is it? We just had one magazine say that Dylan Mulvaney was their Woman of the Year. I think that it was. And then there was some Australian magazine that said that Danny Laidley was the 92nd most beautiful woman in the world. Now, my obviously, I just think that that's funny. These, they're just magazines. Like, why should we take, you know, what some magazine we've never heard of seriously? I mean, most of the time they're full of rubbish anyway.
Oh, look, they are full of rubbish. And I'd say in the case of the Maxim magazine, most people have forgotten they even existed or didn't know they existed. So what a great way to get some publicity, to have a man on your 92nd position of 100 hottest women. You know, but again, it's this desensitization, I think, that is the real issue, that they're just trying so hard to make us accept that men can be women. And, you know, yep, you can have a laugh, you can mock it, say how ridiculous it is, but it is a relentless push for society, and particularly for young people, to accept that you can identify how you like, and then you have the right to impose yourself in women's spaces. And I think that's what's really dangerous here, is that, again, we need to just wind it right back to there's male and there's female. That's it. And we deserve our single sex spaces and services. And, if Danny Laidley or Caitlyn Jenner or whoever it is, Dylan Mulvaney, want to wear what they, or appropriate what they think is a female stereotype and then present as female, go for your life. Like, it really doesn't matter. All of us can see through it, and again, we can be respectful to you face to face, but there's no way that I'll accept that any of those men are women or have any right or access to my services or spaces where biological sex matters.
Now, I'll finish off with where you see public policy on this issue going. Now, obviously, it seems that the Labor Party, they're fully on board. The transgender agenda, there only seems to be the sole dissenter now in the New South Wales Parliament, Greg Donnelly. The Greens Party, they've purged all the TERFs from their party. The National Party, I'm not aware of any that support the transgender agenda. The Liberal moderates, particularly in New South Wales, they seem to have a lot of influence, where I think a lot of them really would vote for Chris Minns' bill. John Pesciuto, he does seem to have he got the Liberal Party to support Moira Deeming's motion to have an inquiry. I'm not sure if that means that there can be a decent mediation between John Pesciuto and Moira Deeming. We shall see about that. The Libertarian Party, David Limbrick in Victoria and John Ruddock. Well, it was John Ruddock that he was helped facilitate the Why Can't Women Talk About Sex in Eastern. I used to be a member when it was the Liberal Democrats, and back then, about 10 years ago, they were fully embraced. Well, if you should have the freedom to change your gender, bodily autonomy, but there does seem to have been a shift in that party there, but particularly people shouldn't be compelled, and child safety should be safeguarded. So there is a debate, at least a discussion, at least, that's occurring amongst some political parties now.
Yeah, that's right. The Libertarians have been absolutely such great supporters of myself and other women in this space, and for safeguarding the children. And there are pockets here and there. One Nation have also been really good in defending women's rights and child safeguarding in this space. Where we go, like, it's what we're hearing increasingly is that left-leaning women are politically homeless. They have no one that they can support. They won't support some of the right-leaning parties. They feel very betrayed by Labor and the Greens. And so I guess the Libertarians are sitting pretty in that sense, that they might pick up some of those votes. But we're seeing around the world, that the pendulum is swinging and will come back to the centre. Eventually, we have to hang on for that to happen. But the Labor Party and the Greens have really let women down in this country in many, many ways, and they're getting more and more exposed. We'll all keep working hard to shine a light on them. And it's now just up to common sense, reasonable people to come back to that position of defending biological reality, women and girls' sex-based rights, parental rights, and child safeguarding.
Well, thank you for joining me again, Kirralie. I hope that when we next catch up, there is some sanity prevailing, because, like I said in my introduction, I mean, COVID was pretty crazy, and this is crazy as well. Good luck with your legal cases. You've got an excellent legal team, including a friend of the Unshackled, Kyle Kutazi, as well.
He's great.
And I know that you'll be determined. You'll see this through all the end. You're the most determined activist I've ever come across.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate it, and it's great talking to you.
And that's WilmsFront for this show. I'll be back tomorrow night. Tim's News Explosion on the WilmsFront channels at 9 p.m. Melbourne time on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble. Make sure that you give this interview a like and a comment below. Make sure that you click the bell to allow for notifications. Now, the theorists with myself and Andy Notch will be taking a week off. So Andy is going up to Queensland to film his Barrier Reef documentary. I'll also be taking a week off. Well, Paul Brennan, breakfast host at Reality Check Radio, will be taking a week off. So there'll be no Wilms report from me that week. Obviously, well, I'm quite burnt out from all of the voice referendum coverage, and so is the Reality Radio team with all of the New Zealand general election coverage. There'll be more reports from Tiger Mount with Richard Wollstonecroft coming. Make sure that if you want to support the work of the Unshackled, that you can take out an Unshackled premium membership at the unshackled.net/membership. So we do have different levels of support available. So there is bronze for $5 per month, silver for $10 per month, gold $25 per month, and platinum $50 per month. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll be back live tomorrow night. I look forward to seeing you all then, because there is so much to cover with obviously the continuing Israel-Hamas conflict war, and plenty of other developments locally. I'll see you all then. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.